good afternoon and good evening, wherever all of you are, everyone. And thank you so much for attending our speaker series, Black History Month speaker series. Before I introduce you to our guest, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Asia Ghazi. I am one of the graduate assistants here at the Graduate School of Education and Psychology at Pepperdine University and our Center for Global Partnerships and Learning. If you don't know, the center provides GCEP students with a myriad of services ranging from publication support, certificate programs, access to GCEP's academic journal, and a few other services. It is through the center that we bring you our programming to celebrate this Black History Month event that's scheduled. With that said, I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Oni Sly. Dr. Oni Sly is an educator, DE&I consultant, and curriculum editor who values excellence, communication, and culture. Recently graduating with her Doctorate of Education in Educational Leadership, Administration, and Policy from Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Education and Psychology, her dissertation focused on best practices for nonprofit organizations who use human-animal interaction as an intervention for at-risk youth. Dr. Oni Sly has been working in nonprofit organizations whose missions target working with youth, animals, and championing human rights. She is currently working on obtaining her second doctorate in global leadership and change at Pepperdine University. And so I would like to welcome to all of you, Dr. Oni Sly. Welcome, Dr. Oni.
Thank you. And, welcome everyone for coming. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you guys joining me today. We are going to get started. I titled this presentation called Black Educators Matter. I'm just going to share my screen. And this will be an interactive presentation. So let's get started. In the chat, if you could write your name, your pronouns, the location you're coming from, if you're a current teacher, what grade you teach, or your profession and how many years you've been in that field. And go ahead and just throw it in the chat. And I can start first, I suppose. My name is Oni Sly. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm located in Northridge, California. I'm not teaching anymore, but I have taught for the last 7 years. I'm still an educator, DEI consultant, and a curriculum editor. All right, so given that I'm a DEI consultant, I wanted to frame this a presentation with these concepts in mind. So providing 8 different definitions. So starting with diversity, it's a collection of people. We're taking into account different elements of humans. There's intersectionality. What is the connectedness between our race, our class, or our gender? We have inclusion, which is the degree to which diverse individuals are able to participate fully and contribute based off their knowledge and their experiences. Equity, the promotion of justice, impartiality, and fairness within procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or systems. We also have racial equity, the condition of which we achieve if one's racial identity no longer predicted in a statistical sense, how one fares. Sometimes we hear this word explicit bias, our assumptions, association, or judgment influenced by stereotypes, prejudice, personal experiences, which bear some foresight or some intentions. We have to sometimes we always recognize our privilege, what place of privilege we come from, what are the societal norms that are advantageous or disadvantageous for others. An implicit bias, the automatic assumptions with quick judgments made without awareness, intention, or control. And so with those 8 concepts in mind, we can move forward. So I'd like you guys to think back to your primary school days, or maybe your secondary school days. Did you have a teacher or educator that looked like you? And if you did they make an impact on your personal or academic experience or your journey? So we're going to take a minute. And feel free to put it in the chat. Yes, no. You didn't. No. No. Yeah. So we got a couple of no's. It wasn't until I got to middle school that I had a teacher that looked like me. Her name was Miss Brown. She taught Spanish. And her influence on my language development really has improved like my journey with trying to learn languages. So having her in 7th grade, had her in 7th grade and in 8th grade for Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. She's really driven or allowed me to take on wanting to learn new languages, because without her, I had a Spanish teacher in high school that did not look like me, but she did not impact me. She did not influence me to want to continue in this learning of Spanish. Oh, we went too fast. So let's talk about the demographics of teachers in the United States. Nationally, teachers here in the US, 80% are white. And of the teachers, male and female, it's 77% female. In California, we have a breakdown of 61% teachers are white, and 73% of teachers are female that are white. But in comparison, African-American male teachers is 1.2%. Within LAUSD, we have this breakdown, which is on the left here. The primary group of teachers is actually Hispanic or Hispanic Latino, with 44 or almost 45% of teachers being Hispanic, whereas the second highest is 31% white and 8% Black or African American. Now, considering the demographics of LAUSD in California, it's 73% of students are Hispanic Latino. So it's a higher ratio of BIPOC students in comparison to the teachers, which is predominantly white. When you're looking at having the impacts of having a BIPOC or a BIPOC teacher, and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, or People of Color teachers, if I didn't explain that before. You're looking at having the improvements in problem solving and critical thinking and creativity for these students of color. Statistically, there's less disciplinary issues that are resulting in the classroom. So you're seeing less suspensions, less referrals, and less expulsions for primarily Black male students. There's a reduction in high school dropout rates amongst Black male students, because Black male students are the highest rate of students who drop out during high school in comparison to white students and Black female students. When you have more Black or BIPOC teachers, BIPOC teachers, they're more likely to take college exams or intend to go to college. Excuse that typo there. It's supposed to be college. Students are more likely to be motivated by their teachers because they're seeing these teachers, these Black females or Black males or Hispanic males or females in these leadership roles. These teachers are going to college. They're taking their careers farther than just going to high school or middle school, like generations previously. And then another impact is fostering a sense of belonging and building community ties. When you have BIPOC teachers within the classroom, teachers are more likely to make the content culturally relative, culturally responsible, allowing students to feel seen and to feel heard. And they have a better understanding of what is going on within that community. I'm part of some groups on Facebook. I'm sure a number of you are part of some groups on Facebook, but I specifically, it's Black History Month, and I'm in a group called Black Women Love Target. In Target right now, there's Black history merchandise that has really taken off for Black students and Black teachers. So I pulled two posts from the social media, and I'll read the first one. I wanted to add a caption, so here it goes. I've taught in all types of schools, trying to determine where my impact was felt most. Currently I'm teaching in a predominantly white school district which mirrors the demographics of the school I attended growing up. I can't count on one hand how many Black teachers I had. I remember my middle school teacher, Miss DeJoy, and how she shared about her family being from Haiti, and she seemed so proud of her culture and being Black. I wanted to reflect the same to my students, especially in the setting where they don't have many Black teachers to see as an example. So here I am in this space, letting the Black kids know that I see them, I honor them, and that they can be greater no matter how they look or how they are perceived based on the skin they are wrapped in. This post really hit home for me because I didn't have a Black teacher until middle school, and I wasn't influenced. I didn't feel culturally seen or culturally heard. I didn't feel that connection. And so by having these teachers in these primary school grades, allowing students to, one, be seen and be heard, but also to academically grow, make the content culturally relative, culturally responsive. We're hearing a lot of things about being anti-racist. And so by having these BIPOC teachers in these primary and secondary school classes, you're allowing these children or these students to engage in communities that they otherwise wouldn't have engaged in, to allow them to understand different cultures, different languages, different backgrounds, and be a culturally responsive human being, and ultimately lead to being anti-racist. Another post I saw recently, she said, I taught elementary school in a PW district. PW stands for predominantly white. Today I wore my Black History Month sweatshirt, the one with the hands. I was headed to the bathroom and turned the corner to a first grade student of color, eyes wide open, jumping up and down. We had the same shirt on. Hashtag representation matters. And she wrote an update. Our pic is going in the principal's Feb newsletter and the video of the school. Mom also gave me permission to use our pic for the social media campaign I'm part of for hiring teachers of color. Which leads me to, well, let's start with this. How we have some issues in this relation. So how can we make a positive impact on student learning with, in regards of being anti-racist, being culturally responsible and responsive? We need to increase the number of BIPOC or BIPOC teachers to reflect school demographics, and ultimately make the content culturally relative. However, we have an issue or a challenge with BIPOC or BIPOC teachers in schools. It's significantly lower. The percentage is just significantly lower for Black, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American teachers in comparison to their students. So I pose this question to you. I have an answer, but how do we increase the numbers of BIPOC teachers in schools and address high turnover rates in schools? One solution is significantly or improve this significant systemic and cultural changes in HR practices and school culture. But what does that mean? What does it mean to have cultural change in HR practices and school culture? So this question I pose to you guys. So in the chat, or if someone would like to turn on their microphone and share their answers, can use the raise hands button. How do you think we can increase the number of BIPOC teachers in schools and address the high turnover in schools?
As you've already mentioned, that representation matters, right? So if you don't see individuals that look like you, it's less likely that you would necessarily think that perhaps that might be a profession for you. So perhaps maybe doing more mentoring or providing our youth with more opportunities to see what it feels like. You know, for a while we did bring your child to work day kind of thing, so that kids could see opportunities and what parents did. So maybe partnering with more community organizations so that kids can have some sort of engagement, and even young adults, you know, could see what's available and what it's like from a different perspective than the traditional way.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Gabby. Dr. Robinson, I see you wrote in the chat. Would you like to share?
Sure, sorry, I was finding my mute button. Finishing up a paragraph.
Oh,
I was thinking about, I know a lot of organizations and institutions are starting to really rethink how they're recruiting talent. And are they consistently going to outlets where you're going to find more Caucasians or people of one particular race or culture, or are they expanding where they're recruiting? And so maybe that's on the side of the school system, but then are we also considering what some of the professionals might be thinking and their hesitancies of entering the workforce? You know, if there's unequal representation, you might question whether your voice or opinion is going to be heard or supported, or maybe you want to take on an approach to create more BIPOC teachers in schools. But if you're a minority, are people going to listen and really build on that mission and purpose that you have? And so that might shut down some teachers or people from wanting to join that profession. So those thoughts just immediately came to mind from both sides of the equation.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
The other piece I think that goes along with that is this idea. You start seeing that a lot of our BIPOC community kind of gravitates towards non-traditional schooling, right? So charter schools, private institutions that have a non-traditional approach. So I think being open to exploring non-traditional avenues of education within our current traditional systems, and looking at how kids actually learn. Right. We've removed so much of our uniqueness outside of our programs because we teach to the middle, and a lot of students don't really thrive in those environments. So maybe looking at, doing more around non-traditional settings, non-traditional environments. How could that benefit the profession as a whole? How can we attract, or how can we incentivize and attract marginalized communities in such a way that it's more of a grassroots effort to educate within a community? I know Charlotta and I have talked at length about community and what the implications are of the community within our school systems, of not just parent engagement, but holistically bringing the community together.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Charlotta, go ahead. Thank you for using your hand raise button.
Yeah, I think to build on that is making sure that when we're recruiting, that those young people have had good experiences with teachers who look like them. Because if you've been shaped and molded by a system that's taught you to hate yourself, that's what you transmit. And so I think that's also as important, is making sure that one of the things that we're doing when it comes to recruiting educators is making sure that they know that it's really about caring for the student. It's not just about teaching them the information, but truly being invested in their humanity and seeing them for who they are, and asking the question, how do you see them? And how do you see yourself? Because that's as much a part of education as anything else.
Right. I think that brings it back to that bias piece, that implicit and explicit bias. Are the teachers who are coming up, was these negative or biased teachings instilled or ingrained in these new teachers, and will that continue to pass on, which will lead to a positive or a negative experience with those students that can really have a huge impact on them, for sure. Definitely. Any other thoughts on how to address high turnover in schools? How do we address that? I think one thought with, significant changing hiring practices within HR, the HR professionals or the leadership there must be some buy-in and understanding that we need more diversity in the schools so that students have a more inclusive or more culturally developed perspective. I'm reading the chat. Hold on one second. Be inclusive and also So Sharon writes, being inclusive and also incentivizing teachers with what they need most. Oh yeah, definitely what they need most. I think having come out of the classroom, I think part of the reason for changing different school districts, because I've been in 3 different school districts, I did not have what I needed most while I was serving the students that look like me, and their test scores were going up, and I built connections with them and their families, and still to this day do. I did not have the resources, which is as simple as having pens and pencils and erasers, or culturally relative curriculum, access to technology, and that can have a detrimental effect on teacher turnover. Teachers are also unsupported. The HR practices should, well, I've got a couple of things in the chat. Should include appreciating and providing support. Yes, definitely, Dr. Ghazi. I think HR practices should include appreciating and providing support. I think during professional developments, they work a lot on, wanting to stress DEI and being equitable and providing support, but it's all talk. So where is the action behind the saying you want to support teachers, you appreciate teachers? Where is that action? Like what actions do teachers, or we as teachers or educators or adjunct professors or tenure professors, what support, what resources do we need in order to feel supported and not want to jump ship and go somewhere else? I think it's Parnshu. Thank you for your comment. It says we should increase hiring of teachers from different communities to maintain the balance in the education system. For sure, definitely. Would you like to elaborate on that? If anyone would like to elaborate or jump in, please feel free to turn your microphones on or use your raised hand function. I also think it's important to provide teachers with high income and more benefits, as they are the ones who make us the people we are today. That is a huge topic within in politics today. I mean, specifically in California, pay. There was an NPR article that came out a few weeks ago, or maybe it was the LA Times article, and it stated that a manager at Panda Express was making 200 grand, while a teacher on average was making $56,000. A manager at Panda Express and a teacher. I mean, while I love me some Panda Express, and I think that managers in food service are important jobs, teachers are also very important and should be paid for their work. So thank you for your comment. In the current educational climate, I think teachers need support from a variety of places: parents, school boards, the community, and providing necessary resources to do your job well. And yes, I agree. A teacher should be getting 6 figures for sure. For sure. I totally agree. Because yes, teachers are critically needed, and the pay should reflect what we are, the workforce. So with that, I have included a list of resources for educators with a DEI anti-racist perspective. I think that having both those will both improve our understanding of educators working with students that look like them, and bring a more culturally relative and inclusive perspective. So just a few, and I can email these couple of resources should you feel the need to use them. So some books and some articles to read, and some additional resources for educators can be found at the California Conference of Equity and Justice. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, or would like a copy of the resources, you can always email me. And I got this template from Slidesgo. Thank you.
Thank you, Gianni. So if anyone has any questions, I would love for you to go ahead and share those questions with us.
I will put my email in the chat.
Well, I had a question. You just mentioned the California conference. What was it called again?
The California Conference of Equity and Justice.
Equity and Justice. And have you presented in that conference before?
I have not. I've because I'm a DEI consultant. I attend a number of DEI presentations, and one of the presenters who I've seen a couple of times, she's been to that conference, and she shared that resource with me.
Great, that's awesome. So we've got a question in here. We've got actually a couple of questions from Pranshu Kumar. Thank you so much, Pranshu. He says, being in the 21st century, it hits badly to see that we are struggling to maintain balance and talking about inclusion and diversity. Yes. You being a curriculum developer, what difference do you find between the American and Indian education systems in terms of racial disparity?
That's a great question. I personally am not familiar with the Indian education system. I think in comparison to the education systems that I am familiar with, I think that they can sometimes lag in the amount of correct information. I'll use correct information, or racially driven information. I think that it can there probably is a lot of disparities. I think when you look at the way that we as Americans reflect history in history books and in English books and such, it doesn't always reflect that of the whole picture or everyone's community. And that can be detrimental to, our students, because they're not learning, they're not getting a holistic perspective. I mean, if you'd like, can you share a little bit about the Indian education system?
Definitely, I would like to say about Indian education system. Actually, in our Indian education system, it is holistic in nature. It's basically provide a equal opportunity to every person and individual coming from the different racial and different background. That's what the theme of our education system is, diversity and equality. The curriculum designed by our education department is based on the it's not basically based on the culture, but it is based on the nationalist idea, development of the every individual from the grassroots to the upper level, and that's what our Indian education system is. But in the some field of education disparity, we also suffer, but we are working on this. Basically, inclusion in the field of mental ability and disability, but in the field of racial disparity, Indian education system is currently heading towards much better than any southern or whatever you can call. That's our education system is currently leading in this country, Asian country. It's basically broad in nature that provide opportunity to every individual on the choice. Right now, we have proposed our new education policy also, which is generalistic in nature and provide opportunity to every student to choose according to their choice and according to their interest also. So we are opening our education system according to the needs of the student and what's our current society demands. That's we are going to change in our education system with the help of our government. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I think I have a little better understanding of the Indian education system. Dr. Gabby, did you want to share something?
Oh, I mean, go ahead if you want to respond. I can wait.
Oh, yeah. I think, so with that being said, I think that there are some similarities in certain school districts or school types in relation to how they treat students or how they treat the curriculum for students. I think that's a lot more private schools and charter schools are leaning towards a more holistic approach to students. There's certain schools locally that allow students to choose their educational route, what they're going to study, and not have a strict, here's the standards, here's the California Common Core state standards, and here's a lesson, and here's your curriculum book, and that's all I'm going to teach. I think that there's some schools in some areas throughout the United States are moving towards that way, but I don't know that there's going to be any American policy that fully engages in the holistic approach.
Can I also jump in here to address the whole question about the disparities between, or the differences between education in India versus education in the United States? Our governmental structures actually have a lot to do with education in the United States because we're governed by state. So every state within the union has different requirements, has different standards, while we all have a overarching federal mandate, or it's not even a mandate, it's more of a guidance as to what we need to teach within our educational systems. Each state approaches it different. So when we think about policy, it's not a mandated policy, and we've seen it, with the No Child Left Behind, there was a policy established, but every state approached it different. And depending on the politics, which is unfortunate, within each state, how it gets applied is different. So we have to be mindful of that because that impacts our curriculum. Here in California, we tend to be a blue state. We're a little bit more liberal in our approach, but we have enclaves that don't feel that way. In our more conservative areas, education looks a little bit different. The focus is different. And so that's where we start seeing the bias. That's where we start seeing some of the disparity that exists. And it's not just race, it's race, gender, socioeconomic class, or socioeconomic status, it's access. So it's a more complex issue, and it looks different depending on what region within the United States you find yourself in.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Not all states, we have 50 states, not all states use Common Core, and that's Common Core reading and Common Core math. Texas is one of the largest states and they don't use Common Core. And New York, they have Engaged New York. So they have their own, they're the largest school district. Next is Los Angeles Unified, and they have their own policies, educational policies within the state. So it definitely varies amongst states and amongst school types for sure. I appreciate your next comment, your question. What elements do school leaders need to focus on to practice inclusive leadership and reflect the ideas of inclusion throughout the school environment. So I think that one element that they need to have, they need to be action oriented and transparent and have some accountability. I know a lot of some school leaders can just be going through the motions. They're, like I said, talking about DEI and being anti-racist or anti-bias within the school district, and doing these professional development sessions just to say that they are doing the professional developments, but there's no actions, there's no accountability behind those words. So having those two, being action oriented and accountable, and also they need to create an environment or a school culture where you can encourage and support the ideas of teachers and students and staff, that inclusivity and understanding of all of the stakeholders really helps promote an environment that is inclusive, and in turn will allow your teachers, your students, your staff to ultimately develop an inclusive leadership style. So by having it at the top, and it just trickles down. Excuse me, I need to close my blind. But yes, I hope that answers your question. And if anyone else would like to jump in on that.
Yeah, Gianni, go ahead and put your blinds down, or we can barely see you. But these are some really great questions. Now, does anybody else have any other questions to ask? Because I think, it's really important for us to really understand not even just inclusiveness, diversity, but also for us to really understand, the different environments that teachers are in, and the issues. Like earlier, I brought up the fact that teachers should be getting paid more and they should be getting the 6 figures, right? And so what is it that maybe we can do to support teachers, to support our school systems and being able to promote that support? Because coming from an HR background, right, I tend to look at that and I go, okay, if we're trying to retain people in our industry or in our organization, we have to make sure that we're giving them what it is that they need, and we're providing, for them. And in some cases, that means giving them more income so they're able to, live better, they're able to afford things, they're able to have better benefits. What can we do there, especially for those of us, especially, that are BIPOC, BIPOC. So, do you have any suggestions there? Jan? Yeah, for you.
I saw someone turn their microphone on, so I thought you're asking the group. But what are some, I think, excuse me, my dog's barking, with it's really challenging, knowing that you come from an HR background. I think what teachers need for support is, or needs to be reflected in HR practices is inclusion and the taking initiative to dive deep in these realms of DEI and figuring out what exactly BIPOC individuals want from the school districts. And I think that I actually went to a presentation 2 days ago, and they did a a whole employee survey, specifically asking each individual, giving each employee a voice on what they needed, what support would really help them, and what issues they also had, in order to, further develop the work culture, the work environment, in order to ultimately improve it. So having had that, having went to that presentation, I think it's HR individuals or personnel really taking the initiative to like get out there and not just wait for a complaint to come in, or a teacher to just leave, because then by then it's too late.
Jayoni, I wonder, when we have the conversation about inclusive leadership and how our current educational system is structured, do you think it would make a difference if we had more BIPOC community at the decision-making table, making decisions about resource allocation, and having those conversations about recruitment and retention? Because a lot of that happens at the district level. And as we've seen with many organizations, not just education, the people in power tend to be dominant culture, right? For better or worse. It's not a judgment statement, it's a factual one. In most cases, when you start looking at structures within organizations, people that are making the decisions tend to be people that already hold power. So having BIPOC community in those spaces, being part of the conversation, it's that whole idea of having a seat at the table. Having a seat at the table isn't enough anymore, right? It's having a voice at the table, not just the seat. So talk a little bit about your thoughts around that decision-making process, the dynamics in the allocation of resources, and how that could be shifted in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I will give you a personal experience. The last school I worked at, there was a lot of decisions being made. COVID was just starting, so it was early 2020. We're switching over to distance learning. And there was a lot of committees forming. There was a curriculum and instruction committee. There was distance learning. There was after school ELP, which is an expanded learning program, the after school program, and how parents who were, used to go to work and have their child stay after school, we needed to figure that out, how we were going to allocate money to curriculum, and that was distance learning, relevant. How could we translate being in person to online? And also PPE committee. How do we allocate funds to that? I think me being a school teacher, I joined those committees because I had boots on the ground. I'm in the classroom. I'm experiencing what's going on with my students. I'm hearing what's going on with my parents, my families, other teachers. And so having the seat at the table, yes, it's really important. But me being on those committees, I then added value by sharing my perspective of what was going on, because the people who are at the table are admins. They're not in the classroom. They don't engage with students. They don't talk to parents. They're the school nurse who's in the front office, or the superintendent, or the secretary of the superintendent. And so they don't really have these hands-on personal experiences to share our students' experiences, and fully have a full picture of what's going on. So I think that teachers need to, it's hard to say that teachers need to like take the time to like engage in these conversations that are happening at the higher ups, because teachers are overworked, they work a lot, but putting the onus on us, and also having the people who are at the seats invite the people who are on the ground, the teachers, the staff, the students, to share their experiences and be a part of the decision making, because without their perspectives, those decisions are null and void. It doesn't matter that they all sat at a table and decided, oh, well, we think that they needed, 10 Chromebooks, and we're only allocating two hotspots. But having been in the classroom, I know that all of my students don't have internet at home. So I needed to then say, all of my students, all 28 of my students need hotspots. So you need to allocate more money to hotspots, and you need to also engage or survey these parents to see what they need, not assume what they need. It's really challenging and time consuming, but we got to just do the work. Just got to get in there, hands on, all hands on deck.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Jayani, for coming on here today and for speaking. So we're just a few minutes shy of 4 p.m. here Pacific time in LA, and I don't know what time it is for those of you in India. If you wanted to kind of put that in the chat and let us know what time it is, that'd be awesome. But thank you so much, Dr. Jayani, for coming on today and for talking to us about why Black educators matter. And I think I've learned quite a bit from you today. And I know all of us have learned from you today as well. And your presentation was really, really wonderful. It was amazing. So, so with that said, for all of you on here today, please go ahead and look at the chat. There's a link I dropped in there for you to please fill out a form for us to provide us some feedback. Let us know what you thought about the events. Let us know what you've been thinking about of all the events that you've been at so far. Today's event with Dr. Jayani was the event for this week. We will be coming back again with 2 more events next week. Let me go ahead and share the screen. And so on Tuesday next week, February 15 at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern. I'm assuming that, I'm not sure what time it would be for those of you in India, but it is going to be early in the morning for all of you there. But we do have our speaker series on Tuesday, February 15 with Asia Abreu Berbieska Hidden. She will be speaking on leadership confidence, how to survive being the first and only. You can register by going to this link here. Give me 1 second and I'll drop it in the chat. And also, oh, you're so welcome for coming. I'm so glad that you came today. And then also, we do have on Wednesday, February 16, Black History Month Speaker Series continues with Dr. LaShonda Johnson, who will be speaking about Black Women Leaders Matter, Keys to Success for Black Women Leaders in Higher Education. Again, she will be on Wednesday, February 16th. At 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern. We're excited to have these 2 ladies coming and speaking next week. And then of course, the following week, we'll be doing a couple other events. And we're gonna end the month off with a keynote from Dean Williams as well, which again, we will be putting out there in a few days. But with that said, please sign up, go ahead and click on that link that I've dropped in the chat. the Pepperdine link there and sign up for these next 2 sessions. And now, again, thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. Thank you so much, Dr. Jayani. And I don't know if you have any last words to say, Dr. Gabby.
I just want to thank everyone for being here and joining us as we continue with our Black History Month programming. It is a pleasure hearing everyone's input, having this discourse, having this opportunity for us to further delve deeper into the gifts that our Black community brings to the table. So again, I strongly invite you all to join us in our subsequent presentations, and I thank you all for being here today.